Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Larissa, and I'm a program manager of Microsoft Reactor. We will share session resources with you in the chat, but before we begin, I'd like to quickly review two items: our code of conduct and the event guidelines. First, please take a moment to review our code of conduct. Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and on topic. This session is recorded. It will be available on demand through the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel in about 48 to 72 hours. I will share the link in the chat for our channel. If you have not been on a live stream through YouTube before, please note that you must create an account on YouTube to have access and interact in the chat. You can set that up now. If you're unable to use the chat but have questions, please feel free to reach out through social media on our website. Okay, which brings us to today's sessions. I'll bring our host here for today. Hey, Bruno.
Hey, hello everyone. Happy to be here one more time in the final session. Today we are going to talk about OpenAI. And I have my good friends Carlota and Corey here to rock their AI world. So before we begin, quick review about the Hack Together is finishing today. We have so many amazing issues, PR, a lot of information that we have to process and learn. It is a pleasure to learn with all of you. And remember, all of our live streams are recorded and it's going to be available in our main page. This one is going to be available in 1 or 2 days. We have 7 amazing live streams about different topics. We have also to support this a Learn collection with a lot of amazing modules. Please go, even if this is finished, go to the repo, the real estate, Contoso real estate repo, and join us. There is a discussion place. Introduce yourself, take a look, try to learn. This is an amazing opportunity. And hey, you can even earn a contributor, a GitHub contributor badge. So we are working on that. And as I said, today is the last session that we have online, Introduction to OpenAI series, but you can go and watch the recording for the launch, the keynote, Copilot, static web app to build the front end, a couple of functions, and Cosmos DB from last Monday. The final request for me before adding Carlota and Coy is let us know where are you joining. I see that Julia is joining from Kenya. Then I have someone, Thomas, from New York. I am joining from Canada. Hey, let's have some fun also in the chat. And hey, let me bring our speakers for today. Let me bring Corey and Carlota. Hey, Corey, Carlota, how are you?
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hi, Bruno.
Hey, yes. Hey, you are going to close the hackathon, the online
The
hackathon.
best for last, as they say, right? Right.
Yes. No pressure at all on you. So it's all yours. I'm going to share your screen, Carlota. That's correct?
Yes, please go ahead.
Remove myself and go to the comments.
So much.
So hey, I see people from London, from Uganda, from France. Hey, this is super cool. But sorry, back to you. It's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you for joining this session today. We're going to talk about Azure OpenAI Service and generative AI, as Bruno just mentioned beforehand. Before starting, I'm Carlotta Castelluccio. I'm joining from Italy, and I'm a cloud advocate here at Microsoft, working on data science, AI, and machine learning projects. And I have here today with me my peer, Corey. Corey, do you want to introduce briefly yourself as well?
Hey, everyone. I'm Corey. I'm coming from Stockholm, Sweden. So typically rainy and cold as it seems like it's in London, but today it's actually, the sun is shining. So I'm very happy to be here, even though it doesn't look very bright in the room I'm in now.
Awesome. So let's get things started. I know Bruno already did an introduction about the Hack Together JavaScript project. You know that this is the last episode of a series. And I wanted you to remember that you can visit the Contoso Real Estate repository at aka.ms/contoso-real-estate. You can fork the repo, and also please give us a star before doing that. And then you can launch the code space on main to see the application running. And of course, then you can have fun. So identify bugs and create issues, propose some new feature, maybe with AI included, participate into the discussion. You will find also the GitHub discussion, which you can ask questions, provide your feedback and everything you would like to say to your open source peers. So Corey, I know you were very curious about who else in the room today, a virtual room, already contributed to this repo, right?
Yes, definitely. Let's see.
So
we had one question. Yeah, I asked some people. Tom is very excited about it. He doesn't know about it, but very excited. I love the hackathon. I love a good hackathon as well. So I think we have a few people that hadn't heard about it, but hey, next time, and again, to your point, Carlota, you can still contribute to the repo. You can still build, which I think, if you're looking to build intelligent apps, AI-driven apps, this is the session for you.
Absolutely. It's an open source project, so contributions are welcome like every time. So go ahead and look into this project. And just for some context, this is an application, a real-world application designed for a Contoso real estate agency. So you will find, we will see the architecture later, but you will find different pieces, but this is the context. You have the website, the application for a Contoso real estate agency. And I know we have a cool diagram here, like, right, Corey? Hope we will not scare people like at the beginning of this session.
Oh, we want to be a little bit scary though, Carlota. So this is like, a lot of people say, they want to build AI applications, and we're going to focus a little bit on the, on the LLM side, working with the actual AI model. But to actually build an application, right, you need all of these other pieces. And maybe if this is your first time kind of thinking about building AI applications, you need to, this might be overwhelming, right? But this is kind of what we're going to explain to you in today's session. So after the session, we're going to show this again, and hopefully all of this makes sense to you. That's one of our goals, but I think we have a few other learning goals, right?
Right. That's it.
Yeah. So we're going to also understand what generative AI is. I think people have an idea of what it is now. I mean, it's everywhere. People are talking about it. You probably are joining us now because you looked for generative AI stuff or want to learn more about it. But we're going to give you a good breakdown of that. Then we're going to look at actually exploring Azure OpenAI service capabilities. So one of the ways that we're going to access and use in our application is through the Azure OpenAI service. And then lastly, how do we actually get all of these great things that we just talked about, right, with generative AI into an application? And since this is a JavaScript hackathon, I was unfortunately not able to show my Rust demo. So I'm going to show you a JS app instead, because that's on brand for today.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing our learning objectives for today, Corey. So I would say that we are ready to answer this question. So why AI in a JavaScript hackathon, right? So you might have followed this series, watched a few episodes. You probably didn't hear a lot about AI. So why we are going to talk about AI in this session? Yes, it's because we are in 2023 and AI is everywhere. And we cannot ignore that, but that's not the only and key reason. The main reason is because you can truly make a difference by making your app intelligent, smart, which means by integrating capabilities based on or powered, I should say, powered by AI technologies. So you can really unlock thousands of possibilities using AI in your application. And to go deeper into this, let me bring here the Contoso real estate project architecture. As I say, this solution is composed by different components. You have the real estate web portal with, of course, the apartment offerings. And if you're going to try to launch the app, you will be able to navigate through it. You will have the related blog post, the authentication piece, the backend APIs, and more. So what can AI do for you in this kind of real-world enterprise architecture? Think of this from two perspectives. You can use AI to improve the developer experience for authoring, testing, debugging, and also for task automation through an AI-powered paid programmer available in your IDE. Your preferred one could be Visual Studio Code, JetBrains, and this paid programmer, you probably already have heard about it, GitHub Copilot, assists you with inline suggestion and also question and answering. I know we had a whole session in this series about GitHub Copilot, so if you haven't watched it and you'd like to know more about GitHub Copilot, I think this could be a great start. The other perspective you can have is using AI to improve the end user experience by integrating AI-generated content or AI-driven conversations and AI-enabled suggestions into your application. In particular, if you are going into the repo of this hackathon project, you will see a work in progress feature as a pending PR whose goal is to add a search capability features to the web portal to enable the user basically to search throughout the portal using natural language queries. And of course, using the underlying models used are the Azure OpenAI models. So it's on this second perspective, the perspective of improving the end user experience, that we are going to focus today. Starting with the basics, I would say, so understanding what is generative AI, what you can do with Azure OpenAI service, and then, as also Corey explained, as learning objectives, we are going to explore how to include those capabilities into your solution, into your application. So at this point, let me say that some of the tasks I just mentioned, like inline suggestions while you code or search through natural language queries, are not so new, could be not so new to you, and were possible even before the advent of generative AI. They were realized using machine learning models trained with traditional approaches, for example. You might be familiar with the supervised learning approach, in which you have a training data set with a pair of features and labels, where the label is basically the predicted class we want to assign to an item of our data. Or sometimes some of those tasks were also implemented without the use of AI. So what's the difference with generative AI? The difference is that now this kind of tasks are incredibly easier to implement with generative AI models, and also incredibly much more performant. On the other hand, other tasks I mentioned before, like having AI generated content into your application, weren't possible before at all. So what's the main power of foundation models, which is just another name for generative AI models? And I like this term because it is quite self-explanatory. Because a foundation model is a machine learning model that is trained on a large amount of unlabeled data from diverse sources like books, articles, websites, allowing it to be adapted to a wide variety of tasks, and is able to respond with facts, grammatically correct text, argumentation, and also semblance of creativity. So these models capture general pattern and structure of data and aim to replace task-specific models by unifying tasks and modalities into one. eliminating the need to train individual models and integrate several models together. So if before you had to have in your solution a model for question and answering, a model for information extraction, one for, I don't know, object recognition, now you can have a single foundation model and adapt it to different tasks. So the big power of foundation model is that they are capable of executing tasks that they are not being trained for. And this happens because the learning goes beyond the initial training process. And we'll see these during this session, because they process an input from the user, which is called prompt, that can contain just an instruction. And in this case, we are talking about zero-shot learning. It can contain one or more example. And in this case, probably you heard about one or few-shot learning. Or even the prompt can contain additional data sources. So we can inject additional data sources into the prompt with a technique which is called retrieval augmented generation. So all of this is possible thanks to foundation models, which is, again, the same name for generative AI models. So now that we know what are the main concept of generative AI and what a foundation model is, let me finally define what is Azure OpenAI service. So Azure OpenAI service is a cloud service which brings together some of the most powerful and also most mature foundation models that are consumable by Azure customers on top of the robust and secure infrastructure of Azure through both REST APIs or graphical user interface. We will see later about the Azure OpenAI Studio. And the thing I wanted to share with you right at the beginning is that Azure OpenAI Service doesn't stand on its own in the Azure offering. It is part of the so-called Azure AI, which is a collection of artificial intelligence services offered by Microsoft, designed to make it easy for developers and organizations to add artificial intelligence capabilities to their applications, without a need for extensive expertise in AI for most cases. It includes, for example, scenario-based services like the bot service or cognitive search. It also includes cognitive services offering customizable pre-trained models for specific domain of applications like vision, speech, or language. And then at the bottom here, you have Azure Machine Learning, on which is based the whole Azure AI platform, and which is designed for data scientists and developers wishing to build their own machine learning models from scratch on their data, and then also deploy and manage them into the platform. So all these services are integrating with the Azure platform and are under the umbrella of Azure AI. Then at a higher level of abstraction, we can find a higher level of abstraction with respect to the final user. We can find the Power Platform Suite that has been enriched by the AI Builder, enabling low-code developers to easily integrate AI capabilities into Power Platform applications for different scenarios. And also, Microsoft has adopted Azure AI across a wide range of its products and services, and also partner products and services. You can think of Office 365 or Bing or LinkedIn in order to improve the functionalities of these products and the performance and the user experience. So this is the overview of where Azure OpenAI Service, you see it here, stands in the whole Azure AI offering. So now let's deep dive into what interests us today. So let's deep dive into Azure OpenAI Service and into the Azure OpenAI offering. So this slide already gives you an overview of the main models available. We have GPT 3.5 and GPT 4, which are in general availability, used for text generation. So they accept textual input and generates textual output. You have ChatGPT for conversational scenarios. You have DALL-E 2, which is in preview for image generation. And on top of that, you can also find some brand new features that let you make the most out of those models. And those features are included in this Azure OpenAI service. So First of all, the possibility of adding your enterprise data to a pre-trained foundational model of your choice and embed those data into the prompt. So without the need of fine-tuning the model, which means without the need of training it again using a massive amount of data. And this is what the feature that is called apply your own data. Then you also have plugins for Azure OpenAI Service, which are tools that help the language model to access up-to-date information and also use third-party services. For example, you can have a plugin for a restaurant booking service or a work app. And you can also configure content filters on either the prompt or the output, which helps you mitigate the risk of model hallucination or undesired responses. And finally, another feature you have is provisioned throughput, which allows to reserve and deploy model processing capacity for large production workloads. So everything that you see in this slide is embedded into the Azure OpenAI Service offering. But let's get started with the service, right? So let's see some examples on how you can get started and how Azure OpenAI capabilities can help you. So these are some use cases you can address with Azure OpenAI Service model. In fact, for every kind of project, the first thing you should do is starting by focusing on what is the need you would like to address using artificial intelligence in this case. So what's your goal? And here there are some common tasks that can be addressed by generative AI models. So imagine, for example, that you are a social media manager and you want to generate the content for some social media campaigns. In this case, you are in the content generation bucket. Or you might be a developer working for a company wishing to convert natural language queries to SQL to get telemetry data. And in this case, we are dealing with code generations, a specific kind of content generation. Or again, you might be the CTO of an insurance company and you wish to extract information from volumes of unstructured data to automate claim handling processes. Then in this case, you might need to integrate semantic search in your solution. Or another option is maybe your customer is a global bank and asks you to extract and summarize relevant information from a high volume of financial reporting and analyst articles. And the AI feature which addresses this need in this case is called summarization. So you have unlimited possibilities that you can unlock with those generative AI, but I just wanted to put here some examples that can inspire you and make things, I hope, more clear. So now that you, once you analyze your need and gave it a name to it, that could be content generation, could be summarization or whatever, you are ready at this time to explore the different Azure OpenAI models you have at your disposal to identify the one which best suits your needs. In this slide, you can see 3 families of models with corresponding examples. And the examples here are composed by 2 pieces. So the first piece is the prompt, generally a natural language textual input to the model. And according to the different use cases, it can simply contain the incipit of a sentence to complete or an additional context providing guidance about the task to execute, or sometimes also a few examples of the desired output. And then the second piece of the example is the response, which is also known as completion. So it's the model output, basically, generating starting from the given prompt, and of course, starting from the data on which the model has been trained. The reason why it is called completion is because what the model is doing here is completing the current prompt with a set of tokens. And to be precise, the tokens are generating one by one, so once at a time, according to its probability of completing the current text. And when I say token, I'm talking about the smallest unit in which language models split the text to process it. And a token, basically, you can think of it as multiple characters that sometimes could be a whole word, sometimes could be a piece of word. It depends from the tokenization approach, it depends from languages. So there are a few factors to consider. But just to give an idea of what we are talking about. Coming back to the examples we have here in the slide, the first example is a traditional completion task. So given an instruction as input, write a tagline for an ice cream shop, for example, you have the tagline as output. So what you have asked. And GPT-4 family of models works very well with those kind of completion tasks. Here, the example is very easy, of course, very simple, just to make you grasp the concept. But GPT-4 is the most recent one and the most performant model of the suite, able to solve very complex tasks, including composing music, solving complex mathematical problems, or writing code with the greatest accuracy. And it also supports a larger set of inputs as tokens. The second example is what we call image generation example. So the prompt is again a text web prompt, but this time the output is a brand new image generated by the model. And the DALL-E family of models is optimized for this kind of task. Finally, we have probably the most popular one, ChatGPT, a model based on GPT 3.5 based models and fine-tuned for conversational scenarios. This means that it is able to get as input an history of a conversation containing few messages, for example, between a user and an agent, and then reply with the message. As a heads up, if you're looking for ChatGPT in the list of models to deploy on Azure, you're not going to find it because the name of the corresponding model is GPT 3.5 Turbo. So if you want to deploy ChatGPT, you need to search for GPT 3.5 Turbo. In addition to those three families of models, there's another family of models which is called, let me see if I can share the slide. Yeah, another family of models which is called embeddings model. So the term embedding in data science refers to a special format of data representation that can be easily utilized by machine learning models and algorithms. In the natural language processing field, the embedding is an information-dense representation of the semantic meaning of a piece of text. So starting from a text input, here we have, for example, what is a neutron star? Each embedding is its representation as a vector of floating point numbers. So the vectors you see here as an outcome of the embedding. And this vector is created such that the distance between two embeddings in the vector space is correlated with semantic similarity between two inputs in the original format. For example, if we have two texts or two words which are similar, then their vector representations in the vector semantic space should also be similar. For example, words like tea and coffee will be embedded in a way that in the semantic space, they are close one to another. So you might grasp how these models can be useful in contexts like search or recommendation, text classification, and sentiment analysis. But coming back to the use case slide I've shown to you at the beginning, so the code generation, summarization, etc., all the list of tasks you can do with Azure OpenAI models. You might wonder at this point, is there like one-to-one mapping between the models available and the task you can address with those models? The answer, unfortunately, is no, or maybe likely because you have choices, right? For each use case, there's more than one model that could solve your needs. The task to address is not the only factor to take into account when choosing the right model to deploy. You need to consider region availability, cost, margin of customization, and then find the right balance for your project. Something that might help here is exploring, for example, the different model in the Azure OpenAI Studio. At this point, I will ask Corey to tell us more about Azure OpenAI Studio and how it can help in this process.
Cool, thanks, Carlota. And speaking of embeddings, I have made an embedding in my head, basically This is my dad joke for the one. I get one dad joke a stream, but it's not a punchy dad joke. But this is going to be my AI dad joke for the time. So we got 2 questions, and I think they're actually similar. So I see an embedding coming up here. So, we have one question from Phi Sharp, I guess. Is it still required to access only from a corporate account? So I'm assuming you meaning the Azure OpenAI services. And Carlota, I don't know if you heard any update, but that is, yes, it's still a requirement. But you want to get your hands, or you want to play with these models. And obviously there's the OpenAI direct service that you can use, but there also are other large language models out there that can be hosted via Azure or be used via Azure. Mainly the new kid on the block, and this is my embedding here. Here's my embedding. Is Llama 2. So the other question Orlando had mentioned or asked was, Llama 2, is that part of Azure OpenAI services? And the answer is no, it's not a part of Azure OpenAI services, but it is an available model on the Azure machine learning. So you can utilize it within your Azure environment, much like you would do the OpenAI models. But OpenAI services is particularly the OpenAI models that Carlota expressed to you, like the GPT 3.5, things like this. But great questions. Keep them coming. We'll take them as they come in. I am going to talk to you now about the Azure AI Studio. So if someone, I can probably actually add my own screen. I was going to ask to, but let me see if I could take Carlota's screen off, the magic, and add mine in there. Whoa, that was crazy. Okay, I'm only operating on one monitor, so that
Here
was in the matrix. Can you see that, Carlota? Because I can't see what you see. Can you see my screen, Carlota?
Yeah, I can.
Ah, lovely. Perfect. So Azure AI Studio, there's a couple of things that you can do in the Azure AI Studio. I think the number one thing, and that's why I think is also at the top, is to test models in Playground. So we're going to talk a little bit about some things around prompt engineering as well, and how it's like a sort of an iterative process. But the Azure AI Studio is a sort of graphical representation of your OpenAI deployments and your models that you're working with, essentially. So you can build these models, train them. You can also do some grounding, which we won't cover in today, and even some things around retrieval augmented generation, which if you know what that means, I'll give you a strong digital handshake. This is if you can try to guess in the chat, but essentially what it is a framework for us to sort of use these models and ground them in certain data blocks or blobs that we already have, and the model looks for that to retrieve answers before it goes out to the wide world of the internet. So we'll talk about a little bit about that in the prompt section as well. And then we also can do things like create prompt flows, which I know this is talking about a hackathon. So maybe prompt flowing is not the as relevant to doing a hackathon, but when you are releasing an enterprise application, you probably want to get an understanding of how your prompts are working in production, how users are kind of reacting to it, and also generating flows depending on what the user's reactions are. And prompt flow kind of allows you to sort of manage that in a very visual way. But safety built in, and I think that should apply to hackathon project, enterprise project, side hustle, whatever you're building AI with. Safety should be number one important. So just to show you quickly what that looks like in the Azure OpenAI Studio, I actually have you can see here, I have the different models. I can do chat, completions as well, if I want to type something in. So what is a completion in the world of LLMs? Let's see if this works. Fingers crossed. Probably not. Oh, here we go. So that's adding some other things. How do you get it? What does it do? And the short answer is that a completion is a postgraduate qualification that you obtain after your LLM. What? That's not what Carlota told us. So obviously, we need to get better at this, right? We need to, this is a very simple prompt, and the model has come and basically given me a wrong answer or what I wasn't really expecting, right? So that introduces us to another world of prompt engineering, right? You probably heard of prompt engineering. It's a talked about term, and most of the concepts that we talk about when we talk about prompt engineering on the kind of controversial side is like the question of, is it really engineering, right? We put this concept of engineering at the end of it, but is it really engineering? Is it like computer engineering or electrical engineering? And is it the skill of the future? Everyone is kind of looking at generative AI and how it's reshaping how we build products, how we work with products, how we work with different services. So is prompting the way that we can, get value from working with these models and be valuable to employers, companies, things like that. And then once you kind of get over all those questions, which, could be important, could not be important to you, then the last question is like, how do I actually get better at it? How do I improve my prompts? And I think, we can make a whole workshop just on prompt engineering. So we won't give you too much insight, but I want to kind of give you a philosophy I have around prompt engineering or prompting. And that is, if you want to get an answer, let's say back in the day before even generative AI and the internet, right? What we would do, we go to the library, right? That's our research hub, where all our data and all the world's answers live. And if you had a question, what is an LLM, for example, or what is a completion? And you have all these books, and much like a model has basically a large training data set, and for the sake of simplicity, let's say the data of the internet at the time that the model was trained on. Now it needs to like kind of focus, right? You don't just go into a library and start like pulling down all of the books, and then you probably, even if you started in the C section or something like that, you still get a lot of books that are irrelevant to what your question is. So a prompt is actually like trying to take the model that has all, is in this library of information and kind of targeting it to a certain section of the library at least, right? So in this case, I said LLMs, or I asked for completions. What is a completion in LLMs? And I gave it, so, it knows looking for this word completion and the word LLM and kind of the associations of it in the data set that it's utilizing. But as we noticed, right, it didn't give me the correct answer still, right? LLMs and completion, it's not, there's a lot of different relevancies here. So we have the right section, right? It knows some things, but it's not giving me the right answer. And to be efficient at prompting, you really want the model to just look in one book, right? Look in one area of your whole world of information and find an answer for me. And I think that's really important when you're working with these models, because a lot of the excitement before was that, we could ask questions about like, baking cookies. And then we can also ask the model about astrophysics in, 2 seconds. And it has answers for both, right? That's super exciting. But it's probably less exciting when you're making a baking app, right? And you really want the model just to only be answering questions around baking cookies for the user. So prompting allows us to have some control, and there's obviously advanced techniques, like I mentioned, like the RAG or the retrieve augmented generation, where we can even get that model even more focused. But prompting is this whole idea of trying to focus the model in the area of information, this wide ocean, and to give us the best answer for the users. And is it really engineering, or like how do you actually get better at it? And the bad answer or the good answer, the true answer is that it's very iterative, right? So you're probably going to first, when we started with this, like we're going to identify a business use case. Again, let's continue to bake the cookies because I'm quite hungry and food is on my mind. So then we're going to have a whole bunch of sample data. So like, let's go out and we're going to get all of these recipes that we've seen before. And we know that. And then people want to know, again, like baking cookies. So we're going to build some basic prompts about like, oh, what's the temperature I should, bake the cookies, or what's the amount of sugar, which obviously is a lot of sugar, that I should be adding to my cookies. Things like this, right? These are basic prompts, and maybe we'll start experimenting with them. And this is kind of also working with the world of prompt flow. And then we'll evaluate the prompt. If it's satisfied, or maybe we should run this against other data that we have there. And then ultimately, you might want to push this into production and also get and monitor the responses from the LLM or the model, and then even get the end user feedback. Because at the end of the day, even if you're just building your small hackathon project, you're primarily hopefully thinking about the users at the end of the day using your application. So finding a way to do that. And then again, it all starts back to experimentation at the end. So it's a really iterative process that you have to kind of get comfortable with. but also get efficient with, so that you can get some real value with these from these models. So, like I said, this isn't a Rust talk. This isn't a Python talk. This is a JavaScript talk. And with being able to actually use these models as a developer is getting easier and easier by the day. And with Azure OpenAI service, we have a built-in SDK to even make that way more efficient as a developer when you're working at a hackathon and you've got, I don't know how long hackathons last these days, whether it's 48 hours, weeks on, months, but obviously a shortened time, and you really need to get up and running fast, right? So in this, I think we'll have a links on these, but we have the library where you can, which I'll show you the code later on, work with these models in an efficient way. And then also we have a whole GitHub repo of just the Azure SDK in general. So getting started, like the question that we got earlier, right? So I want to get access to these models, so access to what I'm going to show you later on. So the first one is you need an Azure subscription. If you're a student, we have the Azure for Students ability there, as well as for professionals, you can get an Azure free trial. Nice. Step one done. Step two, you need to request access to the Azure OpenAI service, right? These models are powerful. And we also want to make sure that, from a resource perspective, that you're getting the right resources. So we have this application that you have to fill out, kind of telling us what you're using it for, and also your company and things like that. I don't have anything to do with the acceptance rate or the process of who gets access or not. So please don't find me on the internet and ask me. But I would say from the beginning of when we first started this adventure with Azure OpenAI and to now, I would say the process has been gotten a lot more efficient. And I've heard some great success stories of people applying and getting rather quick turnarounds. But this obviously depends on how many applications are in the funnel. So once we have that, we can make an Azure OpenAI resource, and then we're going to go ahead and also retrieve the key and the endpoint. And just like any sort of API that you're using or any sort of Azure service, right, we need to point it to something, to the service and the resource to use it. After that, we will deploy the model. So we have several models, and this is what Carlota was speaking about earlier, right? So even though we call it ChatGPT, or we know that as users of these things, the models actually have different names, which, yeah, I mean, maybe it's a bit confusing, but once you get your feet wet and understand sort of things, you'll get, be very familiar and very friendly with, Text Query or Text Da Vinci. And then in this one, we're using GPT 3.5 Turbo, which is the ChatGPT sort of equivalent experience. And then since this is JavaScript, right, we're going to use something very familiar with every JavaScript developer probably has done. And we're going to install an NPM package, which is the Azure OpenAI NPM package. So we have a couple samples that we'll show you. First, if we want to do completions, again, completions around doing any sort of chat-like experience, we can do that with first, importing it in, and this using a node example, but I'll show you in the front-end side as well. We're going to get the OpenAI client, the key credential, which will, safety first, store that in an environment variable somewhere, not on, right in the code that you're committing to GitHub. And then we also have a prompt, right? So in this case, we have a prompt built in, which is what is Azure OpenAI? In most cases, when you're building an actual application, you want to get the prompt from the user, whether that's through an interface or user actions. Normally, this is coming from the user, and you're getting the completion from the model back that might be relevant to what the user is asking or looking for. And then we'll make a function, in this case, an async function. We're going to print out the sample again, because this is doing some node code. And then have a client where we're making a new OpenAI client. So again, really clean experience, and you just doing like, a fetch or using Axios or something with the endpoint that we set up and the key credentials, right? Which is the Azure API key. And then we'll have a deployment ID, and this could be the model itself or the deployment ID that you have set in the Azure AI Studio. And then we're going to get the result wherever you want to do. You can store it, show it, whatever you want to do. So we'll restore the result as a variable called result, and then we're going to print this out in a text file or in the log. So that's with GPT-5 3.5. And then we also have this with the using chat completions. And you'll notice there's, I think, much similarity, but there's actually one big difference, and that is these messages, const messages. So we have an array of messages here. And this is really important when you're building a lot of applications around chat experience. We can give models what we call system messages. And basically, it's like a way for the model to like put on a costume or be a persona that could be relevant to your use case. So in this case, we have the system message, and this is kind of what the model sees first, like, what character am I going to play in this movie of chat, right? And then in this case, they're going to play the pirate. So they're going to be a helpful assistant, which is typically good this is like the standard for any sort of chat experience. We always tell it, please be a helpful assistant and like, I don't know, not a mean assistant or unhelpful assistant. And then we're going to talk like a pirate. Please, you will talk like a pirate. So we're telling the model to always sort of answer in pirate English. And then we have a kind of a scenario where it's the user, in this case, the user typing in, can you help me? And the assistant, so the assistant being the model in this case, are, of course, my hearty, what can I do for you? And that was my best pirate English, by the way. So I hope that was pretty satisfactory for you. And then the user says, what's the best way to train a parrot? So luckily the user's playing into this character of pirate English as well. But so this is like a good system message, right? It gives you a system where to start, and then also an example on how to answer these questions. So in a hopeful reality of this, where again you're using prompt engineering to kind of direct the model, then any other question that the model gets will ask in this style. So that's another kind of key difference between general completions and these chat completions. We can use these system messages. And no worries around, if you're just you want to use this for non-Azure OpenAI endpoints, this Azure JS SDK works in the same way with other Azure services. So we're talking about an AI here. We talked about many things in the other workshops and this hackathon. So we're all using the same SDK there. So this is a hackathon, or it was a hackathon the last day. So it's always good to show subcode to you so you can get an understanding of how this is actually working in an application. So luckily, my amazing colleague Julia has made this demo, and I think we'll also link to it in the chat or in the repo as well, so you can kind of have a look at this. And I want to just show you again. I already explained some of the code. So we're importing the Azure key credentials and the OpenAI client. I am going to shut down this endpoint immediately after, but just to show you bad practice, but show you where the endpoint and Azure key, if I want to store this, is going to be. And then I have this function, which will take the prompt. And like I said, in reality, we want to store this in somewhere, right? So I have actually the front end where I'm pulling in the prompt. And so we're going to enter the prompt here. And then it's basically a very basic input field where the user is going to type in a prompt. So instead of me, just pulling in the prompt or assigning a prompt, I want to have this dynamic, right? The user to ask something. Then I'm going to make a new client, so OpenAI client. And then I have this deployment ID. So this is my deployment ID on Azure, the Azure OpenAI service that I've named. So just JS demo. And then I also have this ability if I want to enhance the prompt. So I can give it a little bit more pushing or direction for the model in a case so that, hey, this is kind of how I want you to answer these questions. And then lastly, I'll take the results. I'm storing the result, which is the API. I'm going to print the result in the console as well, and then show that response as well there. So taking in the response and returning it there so that the user can actually see what the model is talking about. So this is a very basic setup. But again, I mean, what are we on? 19 lines of code, and now you've tapped into the AI revolution basically through just doing a few lines with the SDK. What does that look like in reality, right? So let's see if I have this demo here. So I just a basic React app where, again, entering the prompt, I have a field here, and let's say, what is a completion when using large language models? Let's see if this gets any better. I don't know. And hopefully it works as well, like it did before. So a completion is the process of providing code or natural language suggestion for the user. Much better than a legal degree that you get when you graduate or whatever it was talking about last time, right? So I've gotten a little bit better at prompting, right? And also with this enhanced prompt that we have, right? It's kind of pushing in that one, hey, this is a question here, and then we have this format of answer. And so again, me as a user is giving a better prompt, and also I'm kind of adding a little extra layer so that I'm directing it. And this is, again, a very introduction to prompt engineering, or at least making your experience for your users a bit more efficient and more pleasurable. So now that we've kind of looked at the basic app, Carlota, I know we were also talking about this Contoso real estate app. Maybe you can explain a little bit about where we are with that and how people can start looking at the repo and start contributing there.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I hope the people at home can hear you too.
Perfect. So I just wanted to take a question from the chat from Jim before. So Jim is asking, does augmentation allows us to build specific business data to look for answer first and then go to GPT for semantic formatting or context beyond our business specific? So thanks for asking this question, Jim.
Great question.
Yeah, great question. So basically, augmentation, what enables you to do is to inject your data, that could be, yes, your business data, for example, into the prompt. In this way, the model takes into consideration these data that it could be not have access to, because they are your data, right? They are not public data. They are not something the model can have learned during its training. So it takes into consideration your data together with your instruction in the prompt. For example, you can say in natural language, you can say to the model, look, this data is my business data, taking consideration when answering any questions a user might ask you and things like that. So you can customize your system message to make sure that the model will consider that business data for its answer, and that's it, I would say. Just to make, for example, another practical example, Bing search works similar to works thanks to augmentation as well, because how Bings can reply to you with up-to-date questions if the model, for example, has been trained 1 month ago or 2 months ago, or any time before when you are asking the question. The trick is that Bing is doing a search beforehand, and then is basically injecting the result of the search into the prompt of the model. And that's it. You have your augmented model. So yeah, I think you grasped the basic concept, and I hope my answer could clarify some doubts you had. And the other question I see we've got from C# is about the request access form. Yes, Azure OpenAI service requires registration and is currently only available to approved enterprise customer and partners. This sentence is up to date, so things work like that, like the form states. So again, for the sake of the demo or for the sake of using Azure OpenAI into your application, you can still rely, even if you don't have access to Azure OpenAI service, you can still rely on the Azure JavaScript SDK, because it works also with OpenAI endpoints. So even if you're using Azure or either if you're using Azure or non-Azure API endpoints, you can still rely on the Azure JavaScript SDK. And with that saying, let me, Corey, as you suggested, wrap up with coming back for a moment to our Contoso real estate application. As I mentioned, we have different components in this architecture. The one I want to focus now is the scenario number 5. the add search, because it's the one in which the team is going to add AI. So it's they are integrating AI they are leveraging AI to basically add these search capabilities to the application. And I want to bring back the scary diagram we showed you at the beginning.
Hopefully it's not so scary now.
Yeah, exactly. Because the current PR for adding the search feature is based on an approach which you can see the original code at the GitHub repo in the link. So it's called MOAW search approach, and the approach is exemplified by this diagram. So you have the user here that navigates the portal, so interacts with the UI, including, of course, the search bar. And then the UI triggers a backend API, the search service, which on its turns call other APIs. In particular, it uses embeddings to find the most similar sentences to the query. And then search queries, of course, can be asked in natural language. It uses Quadrant to index the data and then Redis to cache the results. And suggestions are streamed from remote to the client in real time using server-sent events. So Azure OpenAI service is then used in this architecture with this approach in different ways. We have already mentioned embeddings for the search and data indexation. Then you have completion for suggestions while typing in the search bar, and then you have also content safety for text moderation to ensure that there is no adult, violent, or offensive content in the output of your website. So again, as Corey just said, I hope things are more are clearer now with this diagram. And I want just to remind you that you can find this project, this real-world project in the GitHub repo. The link is in this slide, so, and in the chat as well. So visit the repo, log in and fork the repo, launch the code space to launch the app, and then contribute as you'd like, as you'd prefer. So let's the hackathon continue. Even if today's last day, it's always a good time for hacking and for contributing.
Life is a hackathon. That's what I say, Carolina. Life
exactly,
is a hackathon.
Exactly. Thanks for finding the right words, Corey. Awesome.
Oh, yeah, the journey does continue. Yes, so maybe this is your first time joining us on the Reactor channel, but I think it was already mentioned at the top. You can watch this later on. This will be on demand. We also have the Learn collection, so Microsoft Learn is another great resource to get started. So there's even one specifically on the OpenAI service, Azure OpenAI service. And if you see any issue in the code, in the repo, you can always submit an issue. That's huge. It goes a long way, especially if you're looking for things to add to your CV or some good stories to tell, right? Being able to contribute to open source is the probably number one, or at least not top three ways you can really impress employers. And if you're a student, we also have completely kind of AI renovated student hub, with all pointing to our amazing AI resources there. But yeah, well, I guess if there's any more questions, I'm going to stop sharing this and go to if there's any more questions in the chat. Oh my God, thank you, Julian. My part, yeah, I do practice. This is not natural. I need to. Pirate English is a very learned skill. Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Howard, for joining as well. Oh, we have one question. F#, man, you've got the really great some questions so far. I have a question about this architecture, or should I say alternate proposal? But I guess it would be better to explain via GitHub, creating an issue. And with that, I think that's like the ending. That's the best ending this workshop could have. So thanks to everybody.
I do agree. I do agree.
Let's continue in the GitHub repo. You could be anywhere on the internet right now, but you joined us, Carlota and I, to talk about Azure OpenAI, and that I really appreciate. Bye, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Please take a moment to share your experience in this link. And the Reactor is a meetup, so you can join on one of our pages that is closest to your time zone or region. You can save our website and check the calendar for updates. We are always adding more sessions on a regular basis. You can sign up for our newsletter, which goes out once a month with sessions that are within your region, or you can also follow us on Twitter, where we highlight some of our sessions.